I'm Jeremy. Today's day 386 of reading. Today, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Let's get started. We're currently on page 219. What's turning paler? You believe all the rubbish he's coming out was about you-know-who, do you? You reckon he's telling the truth? Yeah, I do, said Ron angrily. Then you're mad too, said Seamus in disgust. Yeah? Well, unfortunately for you, Pale, I'm also a prefect, said Ron, jamming himself in the chest with a finger. So unless you want detention, watch your mouth. Seamus looked for a few seconds as though detention would be a reasonable price to pay to say what was going through his head. But with a noise of contempt, he turned on his heel, vaulted into bed, and pulled the hanging shell with such violence that they were ripped from the bed and fell into a dusty pile to the floor. Ron glared at Seamus, then looked at Dean and Neville. Anyone else's parents got a problem with Harry? He said aggressively. My parents are muggles, mate, said Dean, shrugging. They don't know nothing about no deaths at Hogwarts because I'm not stupid enough to tell them. You don't know my mother. She'll weasel anything out of anyone. Seamus snapped at him. Anyways, your parents don't get the Daily Prophet. They don't know our headmaster's been sacked from the Wizengamot and the International Confederation of Wizards because he's losing his marbles. My gran says that's rubbish, piped up Neville. She says it's the Daily Prophet that's going downhill. Not Dumbledore. She's canceled our subscription. We believe Harry, he said simply. He climbed into bed and pulled the covers up to his chin, looking owlishly over them at Seamus. My grand's always said you-know-who would come back one day. She says if Dumbledore says he's back, he's back. Harry felt a rush of gratitude toward Neville. Nobody else said anything. Seamus got out his wand, repaired the bed hangings, and vanished behind them. Dean got into bed, rolled over, and fell silent. Neville, who appeared to have nothing more to say either, was gazing fondly at his moonlit cactus. Harry lay back on his pillows while Ron bustled around the next bed, putting his things away. He felt shaken by the argument with Seamus, who he had always liked very much. How many more people were going to suggest that he was lying or unhinged? Had Dumbledore suffered like this all summer? As first the Wizengamot, then the International Confederation of Wizards had thrown him from their ranks? Was it anger at Harry perhaps that had stopped Dumbledore getting in touch with him for months? The two of them were in this together, after all. Dumbledore believed Harry, announced his version of events to the whole school, and then to the wider wizarding community. Anyone who thought Harry was a liar had to think that Dumbledore was too, or else that Dumbledore had been hoodwinked. They'll know we're right in the end, thought Harry miserably, as Ron got into bed and extinguished the last candle in the dormitory, but he wondered how many attacks like Seamus's he would have to endure before that time came. Chapter 20, Professor Umbridge. Seamus dressed at top speed next morning and left the dormitory before Harry had even put on his socks. Does he think he'll turn into a nutter if he stays in a room with me too long? Said Harry loudly, as the hem of Seamus's robes whipped out of sight. Don't worry about it, Harry, Dean muttered, hoisting his schoolbag onto his shoulder. He's just... But apparently he was unable to say exactly what Seamus was, and after a slightly awkward pause followed him out of the room. Neville and Ron both gave Harry "it's his problem, not yours" look, but Harry was not much consoled. How much more of this was he going to have to take? What's the matter? Said Hermione 5 minutes later, catching up with Harry and Ron halfway across the common room as they all headed toward breakfast. You look absolutely... Oh, for heaven's sake. She was staring at the common room notice board, where a large youth sign had been put up. Gallons of galleons. Pocket money failing to keep pace with your outgoings? Like to learn a little extra gold? Contact Fred and George Weasley, Gryffindor Common Room, for a simple, part-time, virtually painless job. We regret that all work is undertaken at the applicant's own risk. They are the limit, said Hermione grimly, taking down the sign, which Fred and George had pinned up over the poster, giving the date of the first Hogsmeade weekend in October. We'll have to talk to them, Ron. Ron looked positively alarmed. Why? Because we're prefects, said Hermione as they climbed out through the portrait hole. It's up to us to stop this kind of thing. Harry said nothing, but Harry could tell from his glum expression that the prospect of stopping Fred and George doing exactly what they liked was not one that he found inviting. Anyway, what's up, Harry? Hermione continued as they walked down a flight of stairs lined up with portraits of old witches and wizards, all whom ignored them, being engrossed in their own conversations. You look really angry about something. Seamus reckons Harry's lying about you-know-who, said Ron sulkily. When Harry did not respond, Hermione, whom Harry had expected to react angrily on his behalf, sighed. Yes, Lavender thinks so too, she said gloomily. Been having a nice little chat with her about whether or not I'm a lying, attention-seeking prat. Have you? Harry said loudly. No, said Hermione calmly. I told her to keep her big fat mouth shut about you, actually. And it would be quite nice if you stopped jumping down Ron and my throats, Harry, because in case you haven't noticed, we're on your side. There was a short pause. Sorry, said Harry in a low voice. That's quite all right, said Hermione with dignity. Then she shook her head. Don't you remember what Dumbledore said at the end of the term feast last year? Harry and Ron both looked at her blankly, and Hermione sighed again. About you-know-who, he said. He said his gift for spreading discord and enmity is very great. We can find it only by showing an equally strong bond of friendship and trust. How do you remember stuff like that? Said Ron, looking at her in admiration. I listen, Ron, said Hermione with a touch of asperity. So do I, but I still couldn't tell you exactly what. The point, Hermione pressed on loudly, is that this sort of thing is exactly what Dumbledore was talking about. You-know-who's only been back 2 months, and we started fighting among ourselves, and the Sorting Hat's warning was the same. Stand together, be united. And Harry said it last night, retorted Ron, and that means we're supposed to get mating with the Slytherins? Fat chance. Well, I think it's a pity we're not trying for a bit of inter-house unity, said Hermione crossly. They had reached the foot of the marble staircase. A line of fourth-year Ravenclaws were crossing the entrance hall. They caught sight of Harry and hurried to form a tighter group, as though frightened he might attack stragglers. Yeah, we really ought to be trying to make friends with people like that, said Harry sarcastically. They followed the Ravenclaws into the great hall, looking instinctively at the staff table as they entered. Professor Grumbly Plank was chatting to Professor Sinistra, the astronomy teacher, and Hagrid was once again conspicuous only by his absence. The enchanted ceiling above them echoed Harry's mood. It was a miserable rain cloud gray. Dumbledore didn't even mention how long that Grumbly Plank woman stayed, he said as they made their way across to the Gryffindor table. Maybe, said Hermione thoughtfully. What? Said both Harry and Ron together. Well, maybe he didn't want to draw attention to Hagrid not being here. What do you mean, draw attention to it? Said Ron, half laughing. How could we not notice? Before Harry could answer, a tall black girl with long braided hair had marched up to Harry. Hi, Angelino. Hi, she said briskly. Good summer? And without waiting for an answer, listen, I've been made Gryffindor Quidditch captain. Nice one, said Harry, grinning at him. He suspected Angelina's pep talks might not be as long-winded as Oliver had been, which could only be an improvement. Yeah, well, we need a new keeper now Oliver's left. Trials are on Friday at 5 o'clock, and I want the whole team there, all right? Then we can see how the new person will fit in. Okay, said Harry, as she smiled at him and departed. I'd forgotten Wood had left, said Hermione vaguely, sitting down beside Ron, pulling a plate of toast toward her. I suppose that will make quite a difference to the team. I suppose, said Harry, taking the bench opposite. He was a good keeper. Thank you, everyone. That's all for today. Bye. See you tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to be paid $225. Bookmark, close. Peace out.